You're a fraud. You're a total fraud. You lied to the president and you lied to the country about the $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse. You've come up with nothing. You've left us in a terrible position.
You've called
USA,
for him to be deported now. Do you mean that?
why is a white South African billionaire any different from some person that came up from thought they were invited by the US government that came up from Central America? I've called for an investigation on three parts because I think he's a national security issue. He's a man child. I equate it to a the man baby burping and throwing up his smashed peas on his bib. That's what in the middle of the night. I would call that thus spake the ketamine.
The Newsagents USA.
Joining us now, Steve Bannon. When you see the National Guard, Steve, on the streets of LA, when you see the Marines, when you think that it costs, what, $150 million of taxpayers' money, does it seem worth it?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we've been a big advocate for more troops in other cities. Listen, we have 10 million illegal alien invaders that came in just on Biden's watch. And right now, I don't think we should worry about people that came beforehand. We can get to that later. But we have to get out all 10 million. It's a massive drag on our budget. It's also crushing the Hispanic citizens and African American citizens in these cities. It's driving down wages. It's destroying their schools, their medicine. President Trump, this has to happen. And it's an 80-20 polling. I mean, look at it. You have people with Palestinian flags, Mexican flags, Ukrainian flags flying that are sitting there, challenging law and order. And so this has to happen. I think President Trump's done a great job. We've actually been on the war room, an advocate of much more, and in fact, in other cities, in a bigger troop presence.
So just explain that. You would send the National Guard into other cities, other states, even if there weren't protests?
No, 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 not if they're not protests. You see it. What happened last night? You see this start to metastasize to Chicago, to New York City. There was an incident in Dallas. If it looks like those get out of control, we're a big advocate of federalizing the National Guard. First off, federalize the National Guard, and if you have to, if it gets too bad, send in the Marines and send in the Army. What happened in L.A. It was getting out of control, and President Trump federalized the National Guard and set them in there. And then the police felt they had backup, and actually got the attention of the mayor and the governor, and they started arresting people, which they should have done, days and weeks ago. Two things people should understand: President Trump's not going to let happen what happened in 2020, where this just metastasized and we had a summer of love where things were burned down. They're going to act much quicker because now he has people like Pete Hegseth and Stephen Miller and others in charge. Also, we have 10 million people. We have to have a mass deportation. He's committed to do that. And I said this 2 years ago when we first started talking about it. The convergence in this summer, I gave a speech at Pinehurst, North Carolina 2 years ago. I said in the summer of 25, with the budget cuts that are going to have to come to try to get our budget under control, coupled with the beginning of the mass deportation of 10 million people, you're going to have it. You're going to get challenged in the streets, and you're going to get challenged in the streets of places like Los Angeles. Los Angeles County has, I think, up to 2 million illegal aliens here. So that this confrontation was always coming. I don't think it surprises anybody. I think President Trump's handled it well. The polling's been amazing.
So,
American
so
is back, so it's going to continue. I think it's
yeah,
going to get more intense.
okay, but what about the random arrests that are taking place of just people who happen to be brown, where you've seen the ICE squads kind of going in, picking people up seemingly at random. Now, if you could just identify the people who come most recently, let me just finish the question. If
Yeah,
you
go
could
ahead.
just, if
But
you could just,
your question is saying just because they're brown, nobody's being arrested just because they're brown.
but you've seen random arrests of people who were standing outside Home Depot.
Well, hold it. I think what they're looking for is your citizenship, right? And right now, I don't believe any. There may be a couple, but of all the people that they've rounded up, which is they're trying to get 3,000 a day. I haven't seen. I don't think anybody's seen many people coming to saying, "Hey, I was rounded up and I'm actually a citizen." Remember, an illegal alien that's here doesn't have due process rights. This is They're illegal alien in our country, and they're going to leave. And right now, I think ICE has done I think ICE has actually been too slow. A lot of people around President Trump, the Stephen Millers, the Steve Bannons, the war rooms are saying ought to be much, much more aggressive. We ought to get this number to 5,000 a day, not 3,000 a day,
Okay,
basically a million a year.
just let me ask a specific.
Yeah, sure.
Do you need the Insurrection Act to help make this happen?
They're using Title 10 right now. It's in the courts. Gavin Newsom sued yesterday, but it should be noted the judge did not, and this was Bayer's brother. The judge did not grant them a temporary restraining order. They're going to go to court to kind of argue that, I think, Thursday, tomorrow. They asked for immediate stand down, and they didn't get that. Whether Title 10 holds up, I know that's their legal theory, or you go with the Insurrection Act. Either one, they've decided to use Title 10 right now, and pursue it that way. The president's got pretty good lawyers. We'll see how it plays out.
So
But they just backed us the other day on the on the travel ban again. The courts, with all this fighting we're having in the courts, and it's huge because they're using this radical judiciary to slow us down, to delay us, to deny. And it's coming to kind of a head about his Article 2 powers as commander in chief. And I admit that this is a huge battle, and it's going to, I think, eventually go to the Supreme Court. But whether they use Title 10 or the Insurrection Act, that's their call legally. Right now it's Title 10, but it may shift to Insurrection Act.
if it becomes the Insurrection Act, Steve, could you imagine a world in which, for example, elections were suspended next year if there was trouble on the ground?
No, I don't see that. First off, we're winning. We just won the election in 2024, and this topic was the centerpiece. And think about it. We got 47. I think we got 47% or 48% of total Hispanics. We got 39% of African American men. The Hispanic citizens back us on this. A short story: in the Rio Grande Valley, one of the hardscrabble counties down there, Starr County, Texas, is 97% Hispanic, working class Hispanic, the most Hispanic county in the United States of America. Hillary Clinton won it by 60 points in 2016. Donald Trump won it by 16 points in 2024. And the people down there want to stop to the invasion. They want law and order. They don't want this continue. The fentanyl, the cartels, the trafficking, all of it. They want to stop. And that's what Trump represents. I mean, if you see what's happening in LA, when the city exploded on Sunday, and for 18 hours, I lived, Emily, as you know, in LA for like 20 years, 25 years. They shut down the 101 and the 110. They basically shut down the center of Los Angeles, and we're burning cars, and Trump's just not going to tolerate that. If the governor's not going to step in, then he's going to federalize the National Guard, bring in the Army, the Marines, and make sure that these cities don't burn down. And they're not going to burn. There will not be a repeat of the Summer of Love. You'll start to see mass arrests, and you'll continue with the mass deportations. I advocate the other day for Tom Homan and these guys, for Tom to stop giving the interviews and to double and triple down with ICE raids yesterday. And Tom said at first, hey, we were doing this as a cartel raid, the one that triggered a cartel raid for money laundering. I said, don't apologize. You've got a mass deportation of 10 million illegal alien invaders. Yeah. You're going to you should double and triple down every day. You should get that 3,000 person number up to 5,000.
Steve, as you know, there are some people who think that our attention is being directed to LA to take it off what's happened between Trump and Musk in the last week. The big, beautiful bill was nominally at the heart of that bust-up. Can I just ask you, first of all...
Emily, I disagree with that 100%.
I just want to talk about the bill, though.
Yeah.
How do you...
Let's talk about the bill, sure.
Talk about the bill, because I wonder how Steve Bannon feels about billionaires getting tax breaks and cuts to Medicaid. Is that what you wanted to come into government to do?
No, we're first off, we are, Josh Hawley's going to be on War Room today. We're trying to make sure the Medicaid situation is totally sorted out. Listen, we can't run $2 trillion deficits every year. And that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years. And it looks like it was projecting the future. We have to get our hands right there. We have to get higher economic growth. Kind of the UK is going through the same thing. You've got big deficits. You've got 1% growth. I think the OECD said for the next couple of years. We need we need extension of a supply side tax cut to get some growth going here. I would like, and I'm a huge advocate, I think the only way the math works is to not extend the tax cuts for the wealthy. I think the upper bracket should do the snapback from 37 to 39.5%, or create a new category of millionaires, put it at 40%. And I think they've got to start paying more taxes.
So wasn't Elon Musk right then when he called it a disgusting abomination.
No, hang on. But he would listen. There's people working nonstop behind this on the Senate side, the House side. Remember, our process is the Senate's got to pass something, then it goes back to the House. They have to take it and repass something similar to it. Then we get into conference. This is a complicated process that'll take the rest of the summer. People are working behind the scenes in the House and the Senate on changes to this, right? On many changes, right? To make it even better, to make it even the economics better. What Elon came in and said, kill the bill out of nowhere. I mean, he supported. Remember, he had full information on this months ago and never said anything. And here's the key point. He lied to the president. He's a total fraud because he lied to the president about the waste, fraud, and abuse. He committed to $2 trillion, then $1 trillion, then $160 billion in this year. And what he did is let off the hook the political class on Capitol Hill for making deeper programmatic cuts. What he promised was in the waste, fraud, and abuse. Remember, he had this thing with Social Security and Medicaid. He went to the Pentagon. He came up with nothing. I have asked over and over again, can we actually see the exact cuts that the Doge guys came up with that are not programmatic? They're not USA.
You call for him to be deported now. Do you mean that?
Emily, we just had a great conversation with you guys about the mass deportations of 10 million illegal alien invaders. If Elon Musk, which I think is true because it's pretty open, if he overstayed his visa, if he lied on his new application, if he's here illegally, why is a white South African billionaire any different from some person that came up from, thought they were invited by the U.S. government that came up from Central America? You can't deport folks from Central America that are working as gardeners that are here illegally, which we have to do, and allow billionaires, white South African billionaires, to sit here because they're not. I've called for an investigation on 3 parts because I think he's a national security issue. Number one is the well-publicized drug use that no one with a security clearance would be able to have. I was a naval officer for 8 years. My daughter was an Army officer at West Point. You can't have security clearances and do that type of drugs. It ought to be a formal investigation on the drugs. It ought to be a formal investigation on his relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, he forced this briefing, a top secret briefing on the war plan with China that no government contractor would ever get. He forced that without the knowledge of President Trump. Also, he was involved with this invitation to Xi to come to the inauguration. I think we have to find out what is his involvement financially with the Chinese Communist Party, and that has to be put out there because someone with his involvement wouldn't have a high security clearance. The last is that you have to investigate this whole issue of his citizenship. I'm of the belief that he's actually not a legitimate citizen because he overstayed the visa. We just the other day in the situation in Colorado, the Egyptian guy was here and overstayed a visa. We rounded up their entire family, I think that night, that had overstayed their visas, and we're going to ship them out of the country. If you're going to do that to people for overstaying their visas, just because a guy's a white South African billionaire and the richest man in the world, you got to play by the same rules. If you don't do that, then you're not going to be able to sit there and say, hey, we've got to deport 10 million people that came here illegally. The rules have got to be the same for everybody.
Okay, so what do you make of his apology? And should Donald Trump accept it?
First off, it was not an apology. It was 3 a.m. He regrets some of the things. Look, I equate it to he's a man child. I equate it to the man baby burping and throwing up his smashed peas on his bib. That's right, in the middle of the night. I would call that thus spake the ketamine. I don't take any of that as legitimate. It's not an apology. It was snarky. I regret some of the whatever the tweet says. Look, people around President Trump, and I think President Trump don't want to have anything to do with him. He's understanding now that he had full backing for the White House to do Doge and to do other things. And because he didn't deliver, remember the whole physical confrontation with Scott Bessent came over this in the Oval Office, came over him trying to put a guy into the IRS. And Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, our highly regarded Secretary of Treasury and probably the star of the cabinet, said, no, IRS reports to me. I get the president back Bessent. They went out into the passageway. And when they got into a heated argument about this topic. And when Scott brought up the topic that said, hey, you're a fraud. You're a total fraud. You lied to the president and you lied to the country about the $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse. You've come up with nothing. You've left us in a terrible position. It's one of the reasons you're having fighting right now on Capitol Hill.
Do you think Bessent punched him? Was that where he got his black eye from?
No, no, I think that was much earlier. This was 3 or 4 weeks ago. What happened is that I think Elon got into hit him, but got down and like a rugby move. And Scott's a pretty good guy. Scott gave as good as he got, but that was not around the black eye. That is still not. And
But
I
they
would
were
tell you,
wrestling in the White House, essentially. I mean, you know
I would
that?
say I would say it was more than wrestling. Yes, I think it was more than wrestling. And the black guy, look, is anybody's gotten into a beer hall brawl, you know that came from a left hook, and it didn't come from his little son. It didn't come from X. No kid that age could pack that punch. Somebody hit him with the left hook. So we don't know, and I quite frankly I don't know if it's particularly relevant
Steve,
now.
okay, Steve, did you know about the drug use and the ketamine and the stuff that has been kind of extensively reported in the New York Times, and you're saying now?
I didn't. I don't really keep up with that stuff. I didn't. You hear rumors, but I didn't know about the two things the New York Times did. I think were very powerful. Number one, nobody knew about except people at the Pentagon. I think this is what's so powerful is that when the New York Times broke the story about the highly classified China war plan. Think about that for a second. A defense contractor asked for a highly classified war plan of China. Lockheed Martin doesn't get that General Dynamics. You get small, tiny pieces of programs you're associated with. For him to ask that, and remember, the uniformed military services and the entire Pentagon, including it looks like Pete Hegseth, felt he was so powerful and his demands. They felt uncomfortable, I think, going to the commander in chief. That's why they essentially took out a front page ad in the New York Times. And that you saw President Trump when he saw it right there. I think they had a press avail. President Trump's first response is Elon would never ask for that. It would be inappropriate for him to have that.
Do you,
Number two was in the New York Times story on the ketamine and the drug use. It hasn't been refuted. The one time Elon got asked by Ducey over at Fox News, he kind of blew it off as their fake news. But my point is that you need a formal investigation. You can't go back forth in blogs or in Twitter feeds or things like that. This needs to be, as anybody else would. If that was accused and you had people around that could be witnesses to certain of this behavior, anybody in the government, anybody that had a security clearance, any person in the uniformed services would immediately have their security clearance held in abeyance. It would be pulled until there's a formal investigation, and that's what I've been calling for.
okay.
The security clearance should be held in abeyance as a national security threat, and there's 3 areas that he should be investigated. And if it turns out that none of them are if he is a citizen, if he's not an agent of influence for the Chinese Communist Party, and he hasn't been using drugs while he's been performing his duties with his security clearance, then he should be, his security clearance should be back and he should be reinstalled. But I don't believe he should be heading either Starlink or SpaceX right now with these things hanging out over his head.
Do you think President Trump is in the Epstein files?
I think no way. I mean, there may be a mention of him. He had a personal relationship with Epstein for years down in Palm Beach and that Palm Beach social circus, but absolutely not. That was just a cheap shot. That was Elon. And by the way, that was not the worst cheap shot. People have kind of hung on that because of the salacious nature of it. That's not the cheap shot. The cheap shot is really calling for his impeachment, calling for forming a new party, saying he's only going to be around for 3.5 years. Emily, remember, this Sunday, a couple of days from now, is the 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
President Trump standing at the top of the gold escalator, come down, which he at the top of the escalator was in 7th place. When he finished that first speech, really to the American people as a formal candidate, he went to number 1 and never looked back.
I just want to go back to that question though,
Yeah.
because if he is in the Epstein files, if it comes to light that he is in the Epstein files, would that matter, do you think, to his base?
Not at all. If
Really?
it's some mention, no, not at all. Not at all. He's not in the Epstein. First off, he's not in the Epstein files as people think about all those things that happened down on that island. He's not in that. I think Cash Patel, somebody said he may be mentioned in some document related to it, but not that. People know President Trump knew this guy. He was a part of the Palm Beach, I guess, social set for years and years and years. But no, President Trump's not in the Epstein files. And listen, President Trump's supporters are more in back of President Trump than they've ever been, because given all the ups and downs of putting him in prison and trying to assassinate, he's delivering exactly what people voted for. Look at the big, beautiful bill right now is not perfect, but it's going through. It's going to be a massive tax cut for working class people and middle class people. You see where he's actually trying to bring calm to these cities and deport the 10 million illegal alien invaders that came here welcomed by the Biden administration. He's trying to be a peacemaker, whether in the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia? Are you trying to settle things down between the Persians and the Israelis, or to make sure that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't attack Taiwan? They just had this London negotiation over some sort of trade deal. They're talking about trade-off between chips and rare earths and magnets. So on every aspect, President Trump's delivering for his base. His base loves him now more than ever.
Can I just ask you a question about British politics? Because I know you follow events on this side of the pond pretty closely. As well. I kind of wonder, of the current crop of our politicians, which ones you admire the most. I mean, is it Rishi Sunak, Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson, or even Keir Starmer?
Well, I admire the most is obviously Nigel Farage. Been a colleague of Nigel's for decades now, and Nigel, I think, is doing a great job. We say on the show all the time, Nigel, we'll believe, will be the next prime minister.
But he's right. But is he right then to keep a strong distance from Tommy Robinson?
Listen, it's British politics is very different than American politics. Obviously, we're very close to Tommy Robinson and kind of that more hardcore element, particularly about immigration and about radical jihad. Tommy's a tough guy. I understand in British politics. I think Nigel's playing it perfectly. I think it's most important that this Reform Party get stood up as they're trying to stand up, because it's quite hard to do that and become a major influence. Remember, he already worked and got sovereignty back with Brexit, which at the time when I first met him back in 2012, 2013, people said that was the longest of long shots. I think Nigel's a very smart politician and is become a great leader. And British politics is different than America. In America, we would clearly want to see some sort of, merger of that type of element where it's law and order, not the far right, the kind of the fever swamps. Nigel keeps a distance from it. And I think that's kind of their calculus of how they're going to get to power and actually save the United Kingdom. The Tory party's so feckless, so hapless. They had 12 years in power, and look what they delivered. It's kind of they're the equivalent of what we call the rhinos, the standard Republican Party here, that the populist nationalists have kind of overthrown with President Trump. So I think Nigel Farage is one of the greatest leaders in the world, and I think what he's doing is very, very smart of how his rise to power to challenge both the Tory party and the Labour Party.
Steve Bannon, grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate you guys having me on.
The Newsagents USA.